Today's segment of Sound Balming is brought to you by Jimmy and Mary's Authentic Body Care. I cannot express to you how much we love their products. Although we use them all year, as the weather gets colder, we need these products even more. The dreaded drop in temperature, the dryness, the itchiness, and the unnecessary flakiness is inevitable. Shea butter from Jimmy and Mary's Authentic Body Care is the only thing that works for my skin and hair needs. Not only do these products cure my dry skin, the whipped butter goes on smoothly and doesn't leave that uncomfortably thick, sticky residue. Bonus? It smells absolutely amazing. There are so many different scents to choose from too. Not only do they carry skincare products, there are products for authentic living, face, shower, hair and beard, spritzers and perfumes, and bath products. Let me tell you, we cannot even keep the stuff in the studio. The entire production team as well as all our children use Jimmy and Mary's product. Jimmy and Mary's take pride in creating quality, handcrafted products from simple ingredients for the entire family. Their products are made for all skin types and are 100% handmade, 100% vegan, and 100% cruelty-free. Skincare is important. Moisture is key, and keeping our skin and hair hydrated is essential. I cannot emphasize how much we trust Jimmy and Mary's for all of our skincare needs. Hurry on up to jimmyandmarys.com and check out their products. Did I mention service is fast and efficient too? Don't forget to mention that you heard about Jimmy and Mary's Authentic Skincare on Sound Balming. Use the discount code SOUNDBALM20 to get 15% off. That's SOUNDBALM20 for 15% off at Jimmy and Mary's Authentic Skincare.
Hey everybody, welcome to Sound Bombing. I created this show for people who want to experience a radical, life-changing journey through the sounds of my diverse guests. I hope that each sound you hear on this show will strengthen your faith, encourage your dreams, and challenge you to awaken the greatness within you.
Drop the bombs. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We come to drop the bomb. Drop the bomb.
This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Lamar Darnell Shields.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the time of the day it is. I am so excited that you decided to hang out with me. I don't know how you're listening to the show, maybe on your phone, maybe in the car, maybe on a tablet, maybe on your Alexa app, maybe on all of the apps because we're on everything. Regardless of how you are listening, you are listening. Welcome to my show. I'm the host, Dr. Lamar Darnell Shields. And yes, I am the creator of Sound Bombing. And you see, my goal with this show is to introduce you and you and you and you and you and you that's right here and you and you and you to introduce you to the ideas that will help you unlock your full potential. So that is why I created this show. Now, Sound Bombers, I've been thinking. Yes, I think a whole lot. For those that know me, my mind is always racing. My mind is not in the clouds, but it is in my heart, and my thoughts are all over the place sometimes. But I've been thinking a lot lately. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it means to take up space, literally and figuratively. Now, I know you know I have a doctorate, but I am not a therapist. I don't specialize in women's issues, but this topic leads me to think about women and the cultural messages they receive about claiming space in the world. And if you don't know, I have two beautiful girls. And so these issues are very important to me. You see, I use the female pronouns and refer to women as a result of that, but rest assured that anyone could relate to this concept. So men, do not turn the dial. You see, taking up space is about knowing our worth and overcoming beliefs we have been attached to, or we've gotten accustomed attached to, those erroneously things that tell that we don't deserve to claim our space in the world, or in particular, that women don't deserve to claim their space in the world. You know, claiming your spaces sometimes defies gender. Claiming your space about refusing to be oppressed in our humanity. It's not news that many of the women spend an inordinate amount of time trying to make their body smaller. They've all heard those messages. My children have heard those messages, and we try to switch those messages, making their thighs slimmer, their hips, their nose, their tummies flatter. Now, it's nothing wrong with losing weight. There's also nothing wrong with gaining weight, but we know that society wants us to shrink, or women want them to shrink their dress sizes. This message is very, very clear. Less is more and smaller is better. We see my next guest is the author of the #1 best-selling book on Amazon. I said it, numero uno. She is a friend of the sound bombing community. Her book, A Woman's Guide to Claiming Space, Stand Tall and Raise Your Voice to Be Heard. An in-demand consultant, speaker, and writer on communications, career, and workplace issues, and women's empowerment. The founder of the Actors Workshop of Ithaca, she's also a Cook House Fellow at the great Cornell University, an advisory board member of the Performing Arts for Social Change, a diversity crew partner, and a member of Govern for America's League of Innovators. I would like to invite, who is not a stranger to us, back into the Sound Bombing Studios, my friend, the great actress, thespian, activist, Eliza VanCort is in the building. Eliza, welcome to Sound Bombing.
Thank you so much for having me back. This is one of my favorite places to be. Thank you so much.
Well, since the last time you were here, a lot of things has changed. I think when we were talking before, we were deep in the pandemic. Not saying that the pandemic has gone away, but we were deep into what was going on, and you were working on a major project. So I'm excited to bring you back into the sound bombing community. So my first question is this: how are you doing? And let our listeners know where you are calling in from.
Well, I'm calling in from Ithaca, New York, and it's really funny because most of my job used to be traveling, but still, because of the pandemic, I am mostly in my basement, in my studio. In fact, last week I worked, quote, overseas, and I've never gotten jet lagged before without leaving my basement, but apparently it is possible. So...
Wow. Well, thank you. And thank you for joining me again. Thank you for coming back to the Sound Bombing Studios. We are excited always to have you here, and to have guests who are doing some amazing things every time we bring them back is something new. And we're excited to have you back. Now, let's just get back into, we have a great title of your book. We're going to talk about that book. But how does someone, let's not say someone, let's be very clear. How did you claim space, and why are women's spaces so critical to feminist autonomy?
Yeah, well, I guess I would start by saying that for me, it's really important. I identify myself as an intersectional feminist. I actually think the feminist movement historically has been super racist. And so I think there are a lot of women of color who have just kind of sworn it off for very good reason. And I think unless you look at that intersectionality, it's not really feminism. I digress, but I think that's an important thing to add. So what have I been working on? Is that your question? Or how do women claim space?
Yeah, how do women claim space? I mean, you wrote this amazing book about claiming space. And believe me, I did tons of research. My producer sent me tons of things to read, and this topic was popping up all over the place.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you before you talk about the book. How did you claim or reclaim your space, and then why is it important for women in particular to claim or reclaim their space?
So, well, it really was a long road for me. I was born to a very lovely family and a really wonderful parent, both parents. And my mother then, when I was 4.5, became paranoid schizophrenic. And she kidnapped me 3 times And, I never used to talk about this very much, but then People Magazine did an article on it, and now it's just out there. And I think it's important because I don't think there should be shame around these things. But she took me across the country by truck, from truck stop to truck stop to truck stop, hitchhiking. We were homeless, from New York to California. And what happened on that trip, as a parent, I think about it now, and I realize why I started to conflate invisibility with safety. I thought if I could just make myself little and small, I would be safe. And the world tells little girls, be small, be polite, don't take up too much space. So when you combine that with some trauma on that level, you kind of have a lifetime trying to crawl out of that hole. So I worked very hard to crawl out of that hole. I became an acting teacher. I taught other people how to become superheroes in their own life. But then I really wasn't doing it myself. And then in 2014 or 2013, I was riding my bike, and somebody thought it was a better idea to text and drive than just drive. And they slammed into me, hit me in the head with their car. My daughter says, "You shouldn't say it hit me in the head with a car." I'm like, that's what happened. But, I went up on the hood of their car, hit one side of my head, got knocked unconscious, got thrown in the middle of a highway, an intersection, hit the other side of my head. If it weren't for the fact that a moped was coming toward me, I would have been run over by the car behind me, but they saw it. And I ended up getting a bilateral brain injury and a subdural hematoma. And I woke up with compromised memory, and my communication was pretty well shot. So I had to rebuild my communication brick by brick. And in the process of doing that, I did a ton of research. When I get anxious, I research. So I was researching, and I was watching people, I was watching myself, and I was taking everything I learned as an acting teacher and applying it to myself. And I realized that women who were really fully in their power, and often this crossed over into men of color as well, had 5 things in common. And those 5 things, if people could be mindful about them, would actually help them live a life where they were claiming space. And those 5 things are the 5 parts of my book.
Yes. So I want to go back to something that you started out with early when you talk about, when I asked the question about why, women's space is critical to feminist autonomy, and you describe yourself as a certain type of feminist. Then you somewhat referred to, directly or indirectly, somewhat to Kimberly Crenshaw's work, Intersectionality. Yes. Which was then created by a woman of color who said that she, as a woman of color, she was struggling with being a feminist and being a person of color, and then trying to figure out where does she sort of fit in. Now, I know, of course, you are a woman and you identify that way, but how do you then engage women of color when it comes to talking about claiming their space? Do you have a different approach when you're engaging women of color when it talks about what it means to claim one space? Or is the approach very similar because you share the same gender?
Well, no, it's not similar. There are similarities and there are overlaps, but the reality is white women have a much easier time, period, than women of color. I do a lot of workshops and talks, and basically every time I approach my work, I make sure that, first of all, I'm running it by experts that are women of color. So, for example, when I wrote my book, I had several women of color who were scholars in this area read it over, and they found things that were, what I call like my white person blind spots. And if I hadn't done that, I would not have been able to write this book in the way that it was written. I think that a lot of times, one of the biggest problems that white feminism has is that we assume we know. And I think the biggest thing for me has been when I am doing work with people who are not of my race or my country, I always start out by saying, I'm a white woman. I'm going to say things that don't actually jive with your experience. Please tell me, and we'll work through that, because obviously I'm not in your shoes. I do not have your perspective. And an example of this was actually happened with an African group of Africans from, I think they were from Ghana, in Nigeria. This was a cohort from, I think, primarily Ghana and Nigeria. And I was working with this group of activists that were helping farmers do scientifically based farming. And the first person who came up to work, because it was communication, we were practicing public speaking, he was kind of wringing his hands and looking at the ground. And I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. I stopped him and I said, you can't do that. It really disempowers you. You have to look straight at the audience and X, Y, and Z. And, this was a cohort that I worked with before. So they all were very comfortable with me. And they raised their hand and they said, Eliza, no, you're wrong. In Ghana, if you're talking to farmers and you are more educated, you're supposed to look at the floor and wring your hands. It's a sign of respect. And if you don't do that, it looks like you're talking down to them. You have to start with that. And so, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have said at the beginning, I'm a white lady and I'm American. Please stop me when I do dumb stuff. But now the thing I'm very proud of is I know that I don't know a lot of stuff. And so I'm able to then work with people in a way that's really honest and collaborative rather than coming down from on high and telling them what is, which is often incorrect.
Well, I appreciate that transparency because it's interesting. I spoke at the World Trade Center, not the one in DC. I mean, not the one in New York, but there's one in Baltimore, and there's several World Trade Centers. And I was speaking to a group of educators from Africa. It was the coolest thing. I identify myself as African, have African roots. And I remember going there with my business partner, David, and we had to put the headphones on. And, it was like the UN. It was cool.
Yeah,
talking. And it was like, what are we supposed to just talk? And they would translate. This is before all this other technology. That was cool that we're talking with But again, there was this intercultural exchange. Even though I look like them, I sound like them, there was some things that we had to prepare ourselves for. And so I think when we're talking about doing this work and then sort of claiming space, I like how you said, I identify this way, but there's other people that see things differently. And I think a lot of times in this work, we think because we researched, we read all these articles, we traveled to all these countries, we think that we're the expert. And that's why I opened up by saying, of course, I'm not an expert on this area, but I can't, as Tupac, as one hip hop artist said, I got my name from a woman, got my game from a woman. I've been around women my entire life, but I'm interested in this subject because I have two daughters who are unbelievable. I'm amazing. They're writers. They identify themselves as feminists and they have these great conversations. So I really, really appreciate that. Eliza, there's a book out called Claiming Space in the Man-Made World. Claiming Space in the Man-Made World by Leslie Kern. Not to know if you're familiar with this book, but it's an interesting book and she talks about physical space. So how can women strategically claim physical space in their lives? In her particular book, she's talking about physical space in cities. You go into these cities, you talk about the physical space. So how can women strategically claim physical space in their lives?
Well, I mean, for me, and hopefully later we can loop back to the response to the book, because that's a whole interesting can of worms to open as well. But so a fifth of the book is physicality and voice. So I'm actually talking about how do you physically claim space? When girls are, and tends to be universal, when girls are in middle school and they start to develop, they go from their identity and their value coming from their brains and what they do to if the boys like them. They literally get their social capital from boys. And so a lot of girls don't know what to do with that. It can make them very insecure. Sometimes when they develop breasts, they start to hunch over. And sometimes they just start acting small because they find that some boys like that. And so there's this whole process that we go through as women where we actually are taught to physically make ourselves small. Funny example of that, I was on an airplane and, we both had an armrest. So I had it was a first class seat. So there's plenty of room, just FYI. And we're both putting our arms down. And this guy is pushing against my arm, like trying to get more than his 15% on the seat. And I just thought, are you kidding? So I just sat there and just applied pressure to his elbow. And he looked at me like, what are you doing? And I looked at him like, what are you doing, dude? We both get 50%. And eventually he put his hand away and looked at me like I was nuts. And I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? The response to me wanting half is that I'm acting crazy. How fascinating the messages that women get, that if we want half, we're nuts. Obviously if you are of a certain race, different races have different responses. Asians tend to be crazy Asians. Latinx women are fiery. Black women are angry. And if you Google, Latinx and fiery and J-Lo, you're going to find so many really offensive articles about her. So, there's all of these things that we get that are words that people put on us to say what asking for fairness is insanity or pushy or bitchy or whatever. And I think it's so important for women to kind of realize that's okay if somebody gives us that message, because it's not about us. They need to learn to have their fair share of the pie.
Well, let me tell you, I have a plane story because you and I travel quite a bit. And this, of course, is pre-COVID. I'm sitting on the plane, order my Subway sandwich. I get like a veggie burger, hook it up with everything I need. I got a long flight to LA, and I'm sitting in the middle, big guy next to me. And the guy next to the right was asleep. The guy to the left who had the window was awake. And I never forget, Eliza, I was opening up my sandwich. I was ready, got everything settled in, got my little placemat. I made a placemat, and he looked at me and said, "Man, are you gonna eat that?" But with an attitude. And I was like, "Yes, I was eating and just blowing like, wow, this feels so good." Because this is pre-COVID, so I can blow my breath out without contaminating it. But how rude this individual was on his plane. So I do understand. It's interesting because somebody's listening to this and they're like, I remember fighting over that elbows, because you don't really know, like, they should be a little larger, those little things anyway, because you just trying to fight that space. And then I love how you like, listen, this is a stalemate. We got a long flight, so we're gonna work this thing out. But then how do you claim space and not suffer as a woman when you're claiming your space?
Well, I think that there's a cost benefit analysis that you constantly have to take. And I talk about in the book about how when we walk into a room, if we are in a targeted group, any targeted group, we walk into a room and we put ourselves on a safety scale. One side is complete emotional safety. We are absolutely safe. The other side is dire, life-threatening physical danger. Most of the time, we're not on either of these extremes. People of color tend to be in dire physical danger more, but you're lucky, hopefully it's not more than 4 and 5 times in your life in a worst case scenario that you feel like you could die. But we spend a lot of time, depending on what targeted group we're in, navigating the middle. And we don't realize often that we're navigating the middle. We're just getting reactive. So for example, if you're a woman who's had a lot of trauma and you walk into, you're pumping gas, and a guy kind of comes up and starts getting a little too close to you. There are women who their trauma response, if they've actually had severe trauma, is to go into the place where their trauma occurred unconsciously in order to fix it and do it right this time. Which is why if a woman is sexually assaulted, she tends to be sexually assaulted again and again and again, because she's putting herself back into that place. So a lot of your job as a person in a target group is to start putting yourself consciously on that scale. So you can say, oh, I feel threatened right now. Okay, so when I feel threatened, my response is very reactive. It's to get more danger happening to me. So I'm going to be really careful in this situation and put up a big boundary. And so that's sort of a really big example. But if you're in a situation, let's say, where you're in an office and somebody is doing these very small little microaggressions to you, that's one of those moments where you say, okay, so what's the cost benefit analysis for me? If I am going to shut this down, am I going to get pushed back to the point where I can lose my job? Or am I just going to have a difficult time? Can I pull in an ally? So I think a lot of this is learning where you are on the scale, what strategies work best for you, and then really not being reactive. Because I think so much of the time, because targeted groups are just getting bombarded every day, we don't have the mental energy to always do that. But if you really become mindful about it for several months, you don't have to think that much about it. It becomes natural. And so for me, I've actually had trauma. And so I know for me, when I get into a situation where I'm in danger, I can push into that danger. And so I now have to be very mindful about putting up gigantic boundaries and going, oh, okay, this is my trauma response. I'm not doing that. So I don't think there's a pat answer. I think that goes back to the intersectionality piece. If you are neurodivergent, or you are or you are a person of color, or you are queer, it's going to be different for everyone, but you need to learn what the consequences are and if it's worth it and how you're going to approach it.
So speaking of being different from everyone, what are some things that you learn about women from across the culture, cross-cultural, across the lines, across the river, across the tracks, across the street? What are some things that you learned about women from other cultures that you did not know throughout the process of writing this book, Claiming Space?
It's interesting. I didn't actually learn a ton about women of color through this process that much. There were a couple word choices that I think Like when I was writing it, I think I said slaves, and somebody said, enslaved people.
Enslaved people, yeah.
And this was earlier on when we were just starting to transition. And I thought, oh man, I'm glad somebody read that, So there were things like that were just, on my part, just ignorant. But what I actually found, which was really interesting in this book, is that there were a lot of very reactive responses from white women to the book, particularly older white women. And I talked to my forward writer who allows me to tell the story about it, Alma Derricks. She's a woman of color, brilliant. You should follow her, Alma Derricks, on LinkedIn. She's writing her own book, and it's going to be amazing. She's a former CMO of Cirque du Soleil, so she's often the only Black woman in the room. And I said, I don't understand why white women are so reactive to this one chapter on community building. And she said, because you talk about antimentors and they're identifying themselves as the anti-mentor. And I thought, oh, I didn't. So I think there were several times where Alma and I gave a lot of appearances together where we talked about the fact that I think white women are so used to being centralized that when we are not, we get defensive. We have a visceral reaction. We're so used to it being about us all the time. And it's not that I decentralized white women. I just didn't centralize white women. And because of that, we definitely it was harder to get media appearances unless it was a person of color who we were working with, because there was sometimes a response, which was just not something that I had anticipated. But now that I look back on it in my own journey on race, I think I would have had the same response 15 years ago or 10 years ago, maybe. So I kind of get it. But that was really interesting, showing the depths of how much white supremacy has been infused in feminism and the expectation that it will be all about our needs. It was really, really interesting.
Well, at the end of the day, the questions we ask ourselves typically determine the type of people that we will become, the type of space that we create. What questions are you continually asking yourself throughout the day? And then what are some of the questions that the women who are listening to this, or maybe their partners as well, should be asking themselves as well in this process of self-discovery?
For me, because I spent a lot of time making myself small, and that was a default for me, I can still default to that. So I will ignore that little feeling in my gut, which I call my compass, which for a lot of women has been ripped sideways. And I really have to ask myself, do I feel a thing that is making me realize something is not okay? And if that is the case, what's happening? And I need to listen to it. That's the first thing. The second thing is there something I don't know here? So when I'm doing work with anyone from a different background, or just a different experience, I really try to take every experience as coming in as a place of ignorance. And then the final thing for me, I think, is really hearing people, asking people when I'm sensing something's not going right about impact. I think a lot of times we get caught up in intent. Am I intending to do anything wrong? No, I'm not. So I'm fine. And I've realized that's just ridiculous, that it's really not about intent, because most of the time our intent is actually pretty good. It's what is the impact on this person? And if it appears it's not good, then what can I do to shift?
So speaking of impact and making yourself small, you said this on several occasions. What are some of the self-limiting beliefs, or what are some of the things that you felt made you small, and how were you able to overcome them? Because someone is listening to this like, I feel small every day. I feel small when I walk into the office. I feel small when I walk into the door. What were some of your self-limiting beliefs? How did you overcome them? And then what are some strategies that my listeners can use to then possibly overcome some of their self-limiting beliefs and the belief of feeling small?
Yeah, it's interesting. I just did a panel this weekend with a bunch of women, and we did these breakout groups. And this one young woman who wants to go into a business said, I just want to find the confidence to do this. And to me, my answer to her was the crux of the whole issue with women, which is, I think there is this idea with women that we have to be fully confident, because there's a lot of focus on feelings in order to do things that scare us. And so my feeling is that actually bravery is not a lack of fear. Bravery is fear meets action. And so, if you think about that dude running onto the field with a sword and he's like, ah, and everyone thinks he's not afraid. Well, then he's insane, right? He's probably afraid, but he's doing it anyway. And everything in my life that has ever been really meaningful for me has scared the hell out of me. And if you think about what we say to our boys, and I hear it because I have 3 boys. I have my nephew, my 2 sons, and then I have 1 daughter. I can't tell you how many times I've been in conversations with overhearing parents, and the girl will say, I'm afraid to try out for the kickball team, or I don't know, whatever. And that's when they're very little. Or I'm afraid that if I don't, I'll fail if I do this. And the answer to the girl is, well, why do you feel that way? Let's walk through it. Let's talk about it. And the answer to the boy is, that's okay. Just do it. Every time, just do it. Don't worry about it. You got this. And I think we kind of give women the message that we have to spend too much time worrying about our fear. And the message I would say to women is there are 2 kinds of fear. There's I'm in danger fear, which you want to learn to listen to. And there is, this is super important to me, and I'm afraid if I fail, I'll feel horrible or something, that is a different kind of fear. And a lot of our life is learning to differentiate the 2, listen to the first one and ignore the second one. And just think of fear as a good friend who's there to tell you something's worth doing. And I had a professor once who said, the day I walk into my class on the first day and I'm not afraid, I'm quitting, because it means I don't care about it anymore. And that's how I think of fear.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking of this quote by, and I hope I get it right, by Marianne Williamson. Of course, everyone knows who Marianne Williamson is. She said, "Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We're all meant to shine as children do. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. That's right. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others." What are your thoughts about that quote from Marianne Williamson? And as you talk about your own struggles with fear, what message do you have for women that are listening, and maybe their partners, their male partners that are listening, about the steps to overcoming fear?
I love that quote. You happen to have just said one of my favorite quotes of all time. I think that there's no question that we are told to play small. And the more power and privilege we have, the less we're told to play small. The more there's an expectation that we won't, and we're rewarded for not playing small. And the less power and privilege we have, the more we're punished if we don't play small. So I think sometimes, fear, having that feeling of like, oh, people are going to say this isn't going to work or whatever, you're going to get those messages anytime you try to expand yourself. And even when you move into your own more powerful self. When I was going through this whole process of self-discovery, one of my dear friends said to me, "You're going to lose people, because there are people who aren't going to be comfortable with you when you are fully, most powerfully yourself." And I thought, no, I'm not. And I did. I lost maybe 2 or 3 friends. And those 2 or 3 friends were so small themselves. And there was something incredibly threatening about them seeing me move out of that place. I think also just learning tools. Simple tools is important, because I don't think it matters how you feel. I think it matters a little, but just do the thing. So, in the book, I give all of these very concrete tools. How do you actually, shake a hand in a way that's going to make an impact? How do you stand? How do you use your voice? How do you utilize silence or cadence? How do you handle imposter syndrome? There are tools throughout my whole book on how to do that. And the reason I wrote the book was because if women are going to say, okay, fear, here you are, I'm going to go do this thing I've always wanted to do anyway, whether it's, every time we have fear, right? Anything is important. Falling in love is scary. Scary as hell. Falling in love is terrifying. Starting a new business, terrifying. Standing up for yourself, terrifying. But if you have the tools, you can do it. And so I don't think there's one tool to take home. I think that it's basically, figure out what are the things that are holding you back, and then acquire the skills to deal with that. And of course, since I wrote a book, the entire book was about that. My book is like a little Google. You can go in the index and say, oh, I'm having trouble with this today, look it up, and then get that answer in the book. It's meant to be read out of order for people who live busy lives, who are looking to empower themselves.
So let's talk about the book. What was the inspiration of the book, and then what should people expect while they're reading the book? And then what do you want to happen when people put the book down?
Well, the inspiration for the book, after I had my accident, I kind of started thinking about these buckets of claiming space. Then I started giving all these talks throughout the world on communication, as it intersects with who you are in the world, DEI and B, all of these things. And after my talks, women would follow me to the bathroom. Sounds unrelated.
See, that's so different. See, guys, let me just tell you, if some dudes follow me to the bathroom, something is wrong. I had to tell my son as he's gotten older, you have boys, when you go into the bathroom and when you're from 0 to 5, there's no conversation.
Right.
It's just we're in and out. So we just don't communicate that way in the bathroom. It's like, let's talk when I finish, when I wash my hands. But it sounds like somebody is lightweight stalking you. Like, I'm going to follow you to the back.
Yes.
When you talk about the difference between us, that's one thing that we don't. Because if I said, yeah, these guys follow me to the bathroom, people look at me like, so what was going on in the bathroom? So they're following you to the bathroom as you give these talks.
Yeah. So after the talk, they'd follow me to the bathroom and I would go in. I usually, if I had a flight after, I would actually make the flight much later in the day because I knew I'd get stuck in the damn bathroom. And I would walk out of the bathroom and I'd be washing my hands and some woman would sidle up to me and she'd say, okay, I have a question I didn't want to ask in Q&A. Do you have a second?
So I'm going to ask you in a stinky, funky bathroom because this is a great place to ask the question.
Right. Because basically, and what I realized is they didn't want to ask it in front of men. That was what it was. They wanted a safe space, and the only place that the boys weren't allowed was the dang bathroom. So what I realized is whether I was in Florida or Hong Kong or Texas or Massachusetts, it did not matter. There were about 50 things that women asked me in the bathroom, and they were universal. And everybody thought they were handling them alone.
And what are some of those things?
What do I do if my boss is always interrupting me? My boss is mansplaining me all the time. I'm dealing with a bully at work. I have an employee and I don't understand why she's so upset. That's usually a white woman, and the employees almost always ends up turning out to be a woman of color. And then we have a very different conversation. I feel like I can't get my voice. I just can't talk in front of everyone. And I think it's because the men shut me down, but I get really quiet. Or I get rewarded for being really cute and quiet. But then when I go to a meeting, I'm supposed to be loud and I don't know how to handle it. So they were or I have terrible imposter syndrome. One of the funniest things, which happens almost every time, and this is the funniest, and now I know it. There's always a guy who stands up in the Q&A, 99, actually, it's always been a white guy, stands up, and I'm not picking on you, I'm just saying facts. I'm just saying facts. So,
as the kids say, facts.
Yeah, just some facts, okay? So he would always stand up and he would say, well, I just have to say that I'm in a department with all women and I can't get a word in edgewise and I'm the head of the department. Then I'm like, I feel the bathroom coming. I always know. I'm like, okay, sure. I go to the bathroom. There are like 3 angry women walking behind me looking really mad. And I'm just like, I know what's going to happen. And invariably they say, I can't believe he said that. We cannot speak with this guy. He must think that like him not dominating everything means that we're talking over him. That's crazy.
And how do you respond to a guy like that? How do you, from the stage, from the pulpit, from wherever you are, how do you respond to a person that says that?
I usually kind of pause and then I say, that's interesting. I'm not trying to invalidate your experience. But I would say that men are actually used to taking up a lot of the airtime, sometimes an unfair share of the airtime. So what I would do before I start giving you any advice on any of this is to really watch carefully how much, if there are 5 people in the room, are you doing 1/5 of the time or 1/4 if you're the leader? Do you find yourself interrupting? Are the women at the table feeling heard? Check in with them, because it could be that, and then I say, it's not you, it's your training, because the training is we actually train little girls when they interrupt, we say, stop interrupting. The research shows that when boys interrupt, they're not told to stop interrupting at the same rate. So what ends up happening is little girls, boys interrupt and girls shut up.
I like how you give him, you're asking him to be sort of self-reflective and think about it. My partner, Marina Gilmore, shout out to my great partner, Dr. Marina Gilmore. She's a white woman. I have to say that for what I'm about to say after this. And we do a lot of work around equity, Eliza. And Marina said the more she's been in this work, she says she notices when she's in the room full of women of color, she listens more. But when she's in the room when she's the female in a room full of women that look like her, she talks more because she's typically in the space of women of color. And so she said she had to learn that. She had to ask herself these questions because then she didn't want to be that white woman who's like da 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 da. And when her friends were women of color who are saying these things, I mean, you think about what is the lady's name? McIntosh, who did the
Peggy McIntosh.
Peggy McIntosh, when she said she went to her friends of color and told them, it's like, oh, that's not true. And she went home, wrote down these, said she couldn't sleep and wrote down these things in the invisible knapsack. And I think your response to my question about, so what did you share with him? Because you don't know the dynamic. You don't know what's happening in that room. You don't know the other employees that are in that room. You don't know what his position is. And so I think asking those reflective questions are very, very interesting. Now you're giving all these talks. You're talking about your book, and you're using the book in your conversation. What should people expect from the book, and then how do you want them to use it? And then, a final question is, not a final question, but it goes along. What's something that people seem to misunderstand about you as you've been doing this work and growing in it?
That's a funny one. The answer to that's funny. So, so the book is, I always say read the forward and the intro in order, because Alma's forward sets it up beautifully. My intro is really important for how to approach the book. One thing that happens to people sometimes when they read the book is they have, and I found this when we were doing the test stuff, so I actually put an extra thing in the intro, which is that they think, oh God, I've wasted so much time. If only I had known this before, everything would have been so much better for me. And so I tell people the first thing is, as you learn these things, let go of the idea of wasting time. As one of my guru mentors says, I was dating a guy in his 20s. And I said, I think I'm kind of wasting my time with this guy. I mean, he's a lot younger. And she said, that's if you believe in the concept of time.
Yes.
And I said, what do you mean by that? Even for you, that's nuts. And she said, no. Either you stay with him and then it's not a waste of time, or you learn what you need to learn to move on to the next thing in a more healthy, positive way. So unless you don't learn, it's never a waste of your time. And that's how you should approach the book. There will be things where you'll say, oh my gosh, especially the anti-mentor chapter is a big one. People say, if only I had had this before, I would have been able to manage my anti-mentor better. Yeah, that's true. But maybe you weren't ready for it then. But now you are, and now you're ready. So I think that the first thing is, understand there may be some things that make you feel regret because you wish you'd known them before, and don't regret it. Just change your behavior. This is just all about, life is one big learning process. And then the second thing is, you can understand that it's not one of those books, and I wrote it very specifically this way, that you should feel pressure to read cover to cover. If you're a ballerina, you don't need my chapter on posture. You just don't, so you can skip over that. Straight in the gym. Right. You don't need that. So really the book itself is about, finding the thing. Different women have different struggles. You can go in the index, find what you need. And it's really a resource guide for all women to learn how to step into their most empowered selves. And that's what it is. And it's little tiny digestible chapters because I know people are busy. I even have cartoons. I did. So one of my friends read the chapter on mansplaining and she said, this should be in every restaurant, in every single gym. And I thought, oh my gosh, what if we took first aid for choking and did first aid for mansplaining instead?
Wow, great idea.
And then I did that with cartoons. I did all the different kinds of mansplaining, talked to my friend who is an expert on communication and race. And I said, who interrupts who? Who are the allies? Made sure I was racially representing what really happens. And then I got all my friends who are actors and had them pose for this. And now we have all these great cartoons. So, it's very digestible and it's a lot of fun. It's not kind of an uptight, stuffy book. It's a good time. It's an easy read. In terms of what people think about me.
Misunderstand about you. What's something people seem to misunderstand. Now, whatever you own, but I said, what do people seem to misunderstand about you?
Yeah. Well, I guess
and the work that you're doing as well, because you're challenging people, not just the personal misunderstanding about, what do they misunderstand about you, and then how you're approaching the work.
Yeah. Well, in terms of me, just to put some levity in the situation, I just started dating again. And I will say,
all right, dating, go ahead out there on the mark. For anybody who thought that this was a dating show, no longer it's not a dating show. She's already taken, so that's a good thing.
So yeah, I just started dating again. And I find that it's a great test when I tell people the name of my book. If they're like, that's real cool, I'd love to have another conversation, but at the moment I have to go wash my socks. I'm like, okay, that's really awesome. Now I know I don't want to date you. But if they're like, ooh, that's cool, I want to know more about that, then I automatically think, okay, that's a guy I kind of want to, see if I want to get to know him more. So, and the interesting thing is I've found the more confident, the more masculine, the more successful the man is, the more he wants to know about the book. The insecure men are the ones who just can't. They're just like, this lady's a little too much.
It's interesting. I have I'm a part of a fitness group, and it's predominantly women. I'm talking high power women, former mayor of the city, just all of these diversity inclusion officer for the state, and my trainer Chauncey. And so I started working out with my good friend. Her name is Lisa. Shout out to Lisa Marie, my fitness partner. So she's like, I want you to come to this boot camp, okay? And I was like, oh man, do I want to go to this boot camp? We work out with our trainer Chauncey, but she goes this other guy named Eric who's very intense and things like that. So I go to the boot camp. She gets there late, all right? She gets there late. Lisa's working because she's actually working out one is to take care of her health, but then also to compete. So I'm looking at her on this bike, and I'm saying, she's like falling asleep, saying, oh, I had it hard. I said, listen to me. You're going to stay awake. What the hell did you get me into? That's what I kept saying. And I said, are you using this as a way? I said, do you use this as a way to turn the men off to see if they can really hang with you? Like, are you using this as a vetting system? Now, we're not intimate or anything. She's just a good work friend. I said, but I think you're using this as a way to vet the men out to see if they can hang with you. The whole time I said, what the hell did you sign me up for? I'm in there dying, but I'm trying to be cool because she told this guy, hey, my friend is coming to work out with me. And he was all pumped, fired up like one of these people on TV, like, yeah, microphone loud in my ear, playing his hip hop music and all of this. And so when you talk about getting out there and dating, I was like, yeah, you're using this as a way to get these men not to like, or to like you say, I can hang out with them. So congratulations on the getting out there and doing the work. So speaking of fitness, in the opening, I talked about just beauty. And Naomi Wolf, the author of The Beauty and the Myth, she states, a culture fixated on female thinness is not an obsession about female beauty, but an obsession about female obedience. Dieting is the most potential political sedative in women's history, a quietly mad population, and is a trackable one. So what are your thoughts about not only what Naomi Wolf said, but then also as you're talking about creating space for women, are we creating a space for thin women? Fat women, tall women, skinny women?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there is 100% pretty privilege. That's a fact.
Pretty privilege. You said pretty privilege.
Pretty privilege.
Pretty privilege.
Yeah, there is no doubt that is a thing. I am, I'm 50. I look a lot younger than my age. I'm Italian.
Yes, you do. Yes.
We hold up well.
So you got that Italian root. Now the connection between Italians and Africans. Yeah, because I'm from Chicago, so that, like we say, black don't crack. So definitely, when you said 50, somebody's like, you sure she's single right now?
Right.
Stay focused, gentlemen. Women, stay focused as well. But let's talk about beauty and let's talk about the space.
So I'm well aware that if I was not, I'm a relatively attractive person. I'm very much aware that if I was not, people would say, well, she's just an ugly woman who's not getting a man. And so she's angry at the world and she doesn't, all those like man hater things that people say to try to silence women talking about women's empowerment. They would apply. The fact that I have a level of attractiveness inoculates me from a lot of the things that immediately come up for people when you start talking about women's empowerment, and it's not fair. But no matter how thin you are in this country or how whatever your body is, you're still going to have people weaponize that. And I was actually dating a guy who said to me, and I'm very fit, I'll just say, I like ride my bike like sometimes 40 miles a day. I am a fit woman, but I am not a anorexically thin woman. And this man said, I can really tell I love you because I usually like really thin women, but you have such a pretty face and I love you even though you're not really, really thin.
Wow.
And it was such a little like fat shaming, wrapped up in some societal judgments, but you can't call him because he's saying how pretty my face is. And, it was something that was said a lot. And eventually I realized this person was writing a book on manipulation. So, okay. But, I realized that this was a tactic to try to keep me insecure and small. And I think as long as women buy the line that there is one body type and one look. I mean, I grew up, I'm Jewish and Italian. So my mother's Italian. My father is Sephardic Jew, a Spanish Jew, and then a little bit Dutch. So, I have a nose. Like I don't look like a blonde, blue-eyed. I wanted to be Christy Brinkley. Like you would not believe. I wanted to be Christy Brinkley. I wanted small boobs. I wanted straight blonde hair. I wanted no nose. I wanted thin lips. I wanted to be Christy Brinkley. I was never going to be. I was the frizzy-haired, Italian Jewish girl. I was never going to be that. And at a certain point, I think when I hit about 30, I thought, I don't want to be that. I'm so glad I knew a lot of young women who look like me who got nose jobs. No way, man. So I think that a lot of what we're as women is we just embrace who we are and realize A, our value doesn't come from that. And B, we're beautiful. Women are beautiful no matter what. And I will say the next generation is changing things. My son, who is a 6'7", very thin, tall, white kid, was talking about one of his teachers. Okay, it was a little disrespectful, his choir teacher, but all of his friends were like, oh, I love Miss Whoever. Yeah, she's thick. Have you seen how thick she is? And I was like, whoa, we would have never said that. In my age, thick was an insult. And they were like, yeah, she's thick. And I think that we are moving away from this rigid, ridiculous, boy-like standard of beauty that we had for so many decades, which is really good.
As you're talking, I was thinking about when I was doing this anti-bullying tour in Connecticut. It was probably the most challenging thing I'd ever done. Every night I would come back to the hotel and just bawl out with all the things that young people were telling me that was happening to them. But one of the kids introduced me to this song that I was not familiar with. And it wasn't just a song, but it was a video. And I'm a huge Beyonce fan. Shout out to my buddy Steve Pamman, who ran Parkwood Entertainment for a very long time. That's the company that runs Beyonce's company. And the song was called Pretty Hurts. I never heard the song, but I watched the video. And one of the lines I remember says, pretty hurts. We shine the light on whatever's worst. You're trying to fix something, but you can't fix what you can't see. It's the soul that needs a surgery.
That's right. And
I remember playing this video and watching these girls just bawl out, and the video is amazing. What message do you have for those young girls that are out there who are struggling with creating space? I know your books and your writing tends to go for a larger an older audience, or more seasoned audience, but there's some little girls that are ear hustling and listening to their mothers and their family members, their aunties and their tias and abuelitas. Listening to those lyrics that I just said and thinking about the title of your book, which is very, very strong, Stand Tall, Raise Your Voice, Be Heard. What message do you have for those little girls out there, those little Elizas who the boys are going after this certain image? The boys are not looking at me. What do you have to say for those young girls and those young Elizas out there who are still struggling?
Your worth does not come from whether or not the boys like you. None of your worth comes from that. Your worth comes from what you love, what excites you, who you are. None of your worth comes from anything but that. And I really believe that if you do what you love and focus on that, success in all aspects of your life will follow. They'll follow in your relationships because you'll meet people who like the same stuff you do and they value you for that. You'll do better in your career. So, when my daughter when she became an 8th grader, when she was moving to 8th grade, she was a triathlete and she started acting like she was falling over and she was clumsy and she was stupid. And my friend said, you have to talk to her. She researches this stuff about the fact that she now thinks her worth comes from boys. And she came home and I gave this whole talk to her. She came home one day, she said, Mom, this was 2 weeks later because she ignored me for 2 weeks and said it wasn't real. And then she came home and she said, Mom, you were right. I was walking down the hall and one of the boys said, I like a girl because she's smart, and started laughing. And the other boy said, I like a girl because she has a good personality, and started laughing. And they said it right next to me so I would hear it. And I said, well, what did you think about that? And she said, it was mean. And I said, yeah, Ella, that was mean. And in that moment, my daughter made the decision that she was not going to play that anymore. And she is one of the most powerful young women. She's an activist. She's 21 years old. She's been quoted in the New York Times for anti-racist work. She's amazing. And she just decided, I'm not going to be a part of that whole thing. And I don't think women need to participate in that. And I think we do get negative messages from our aunts and our mothers sometimes. I did a thing on TikTok. My TikTok page is exploding. I just started doing stuff from the book and it's kind of taken off. And the number of women who said their mothers were anti-mentors to them broke me. So, listen to your own compass. Don't let anyone tell you what you love and who you should be. You know the answer. Follow your own compass and you'll be fine.
Great message. Where can our listeners connect with you online?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on TikTok. And I truly love hearing from people on those platforms. That's why I do this. And if you want to kind of be updated on everything that's going on with me, get some tips about communication, you can go to ElizaVanCort.com. There's no U in court. So it's ElizaVanCort.com, and be a part of my community of space claimers, which I am developing.
The #1 bestseller right now on Amazon.
Well, it's not right now number one, but it was when it was released.
It was.
Apparently, once you're number one, you are always a #1 bestseller.
All right,
but it keeps fluctuating, which is really cool. So you can go to Amazon and get my book and my audio book or my Kindle. You can also, but I love when I'm on these shows and people connect with me. I really, truly love it. So if you're on TikTok, feel free to reach out in the comment and I'll follow you. We can connect. If you're on LinkedIn, happy to connect. I have a personal Facebook page. I kind of killed my other page, but it's become my professional page. So feel free to connect with me on Facebook. Those are the main things. I don't do a lot. I'm kind of bad with Instagram and Twitter, although I kind of do it sometimes. But if you are LinkedIn, my personal page on Facebook or TikTok, if you have any questions about what you heard today, this is why I'm here. This is why I do this work. Feel free to reach out.
So listen, if you are a businesswoman or you know a younger woman heading into the workspace, I highly recommend Eliza VanCort's book, A Woman's Guide to Claiming Space. Stand tall and raise your voice to be heard. It is blunt and it is an honest guidebook that we all could use. Thanks for hanging out with me, Eliza, but you cannot leave right now. The second part of the show brought to us by Mountain Made is called the Super Bomb Questions. I'm going to ask these questions and I need you to respond as quickly as possible. Are you ready?
Yikes. Okay, I'm ready.
Let's go for it. What's your favorite word?
Oleaginous.
What's your favorite quote or maybe a verse to Bible, the Quran, any holy book that you read?
Dr. Maya Angelou, do what you can do until you know better. Then when you know better, do better.
What's your superpower?
Seeing what people can be, not who they are.
What's your spirit animal?
I'm probably a spider or a snake. Probably a spider, though. I love spiders.
What moves you to tears of joy?
Seeing young people do things that give me hope.
What moves you to tears of sorrow?
Seeing the cynicism in our political system.
What do you wish you had more time to do?
Read books.
What values do you live by every day?
Don't follow the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Follow the platinum rule, was do unto others as they ask you to do unto you.
What is the book or books you've given most as a gift and why?
There are two. Dr. Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings book of poetry is the big one. And then A Wrinkle in Time, believe it or not, is one of my favorite books of all time. It's just beautiful and I love it. And I give it all the time, even to grownups.
What's a ritual you do that helps you connect to your inner power?
Exercise.
Well, speaking of exercise, Eliza, if you were in the Mrs. America talent competition, what would your talent be?
Singing. I'm a classically trained singer.
Go ahead. Yeah, my daughter is in school. Hadaya Ayodele, my oldest daughter, she's in school at Texas and Prairie View A&M, and that's her major. So thank you for hanging out with me. Hopefully we'll get a chance to hear that beautiful voice. But in the meantime, I want to thank you for hanging out with me. It's always a pleasure talking with you, and congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much for having me. I love being on your show, truly.
Well, thank you. We love you too. And I could not do this without my amazing producer, Nicole Klimpaka. Supremacy for our theme music. And all of you for listening. Make sure you subscribe. Stop being stingy. Leave a comment. Leave a comment. We're on every platform. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you think about our guests. And if there's a guest that you want to bring on to Sound Bombing, send us their information. If you want to know more about me, go to drdrlds.com, drdrlds.com. And listen, do something for someone other than yourself today, but continue to listen to Sound Bombing. Peace.
The Super Bomb questions are brought to you by Mountain Made CBD. Mountain Made is changing the CBD game by offering a line of high-dose CBD tablets at an affordable price. Their products are THC-free and third-party tested for accuracy, cleanliness, and potency. Their products, which ship nationwide, include Build for CBD saturation, Boost for precision titration, and Recover for rest and rehab. With 9 years experience in hemp and fitness, Mountain Made's founders are focused on creating a quality product to help those who live an activated lifestyle. Check out mountainmade.life. Again, that's mountainmade.life to find out more about how their products can help you crush life. Remember, their products ship nationwide. Go check out their website today and follow them on social media at Mountain Made. That's the @ MNTMADE. Our staff at Sound Bombing uses Build before a morning workout, which helps to push our bodies to a whole new level on a daily basis. Try Build, try Boost, try Recover. Our staff is using these products to enhance our active lifestyle naturally, and we are crushing life with Mountain Made CBD, and you can too. Start today by going to mountainmade.life and ordering Build, Boost, Recover, or the multitude of other products that they have which will enhance your lifestyle. I promise you, you won't regret it.